It is the middle of the night in 1965 in a hotel room in Florida, and Keith Richards is fast asleep. Somewhere in a dream, a melody arrives, a short, snarling, nagging little figure of notes he has never played before. And half-conscious, without ever really waking up, he reaches over to the cassette recorder he keeps running by the bed, plays the notes, mumbles a single phrase into the microphone, and drops straight back into sleep. In the morning, he cannot even remember doing it. So he rewinds the tape to see if anything is there. And what he finds is this: about 30 seconds of the most famous guitar riff in the history of rock and roll, followed by 40 solid minutes of himself snoring. Hold on to that, because that half-asleep accident became the song that turned the Rolling Stones from a scruffy blues band into the biggest act on earth. It gave a whole restless generation its anthem. It took a strange little distortion sound and made it the voice of rock music for the next 60 years. But almost nobody who knows every word of it knows that the man who dreamed the whole thing begged his own band not to release it. And here is the part that almost nobody knows. That famous fuzzy, buzzing guitar you love was never supposed to be there at all. It was a placeholder, a rough stand-in for a completely different instrument. And the song only came out because Keith Richards got outvoted. We will get there, I promise. First, you have to throw out what you think this song is about, because it is bigger than a bad mood. It is not a song about being satisfied. It is not a song about a girl. It is not, in the end, even a song about sex. It is a song about the itch that modern life gives you and never lets you scratch. The creeping feeling that no matter what you are sold, no matter what you buy, it is somehow never, ever enough. The song is I Can't Get No Satisfaction. The band is the Rolling Stones. And this is the true story of the greatest riff ever dreamed. To understand it, you have to understand where the Rolling Stones were in 1965. They were young, hungry, and exhausted. The snarling, dangerous answer to the clean-cut Beatles, grinding their way across America on an endless tour, playing night after night, living out of hotels. And two of them, a singer named Mick Jagger and a guitarist named Keith Richards, were just learning how to write their own songs instead of covering other people's. They were sleeping badly, running on fumes, and somewhere in that blur, Keith had the dream. And the dream is the whole reason this song exists, because it very nearly did not. Keith had a habit of keeping a cassette recorder by his bed at all times, exactly for moments like this. He has said that if that machine had not been running that night, the riff would have vanished the second he woke up, gone forever, like every other dream you cannot quite hold on to in the morning. The most recognizable guitar line ever written survived by pure luck, caught by a tape machine while its own writer was unconscious. And that tape is one of the great artifacts in music history. On it, there are about 30 seconds of Keith, mostly asleep, strumming out the riff and murmuring the words, I can't get no satisfaction. And then, because he never turned it off, the machine just kept rolling, and recorded the next 40 minutes of Keith Richards deep asleep, snoring into the dark. The greatest riff in the history of rock, with a soundtrack of the man who wrote it, out cold. Now here is the part that almost nobody realizes. Keith never heard that riff as a guitar part at all. In his head it was horns, a punchy, brassy line, like something off a soul record, the kind of thing a whole horn section would blast out. So when he brought it to the band to show them the idea, he plugged his guitar into a small new gadget. A fuzz box, a little pedal that dirtied up the sound, purely to sketch out where the horns would eventually go. The fuzzy guitar was a placeholder, a rough demo, a note to self that said, real brass goes here. Meanwhile, Mick Jagger took that one mumbled phrase from the dream, I can't get no satisfaction, and built an entire lyric around it. And it was not a love song. It was a howl of pure frustration at the modern world. A man driving around, being yelled at by the radio about what he should buy, being sold useless by the television, drowning in adverts and commercials, unable to get any peace, any satisfaction of any kind, including the physical kind. Mick took Keith's sleepy grumble and turned it into a diagnosis of an entire way of life. But Keith still was not happy. To him, the recording was not finished. The fuzz was temporary. The whole thing felt rough and unresolved, a sketch, not a masterpiece. He genuinely, seriously did not want it released as a single. So the band did the only fair thing. They put it to a vote. And Keith Richards, the man who had dreamed the riff, lost. He was outvoted by his own bandmates, and the song went out into the world against his wishes. And what happened when they actually recorded it is the whole reason we are talking about it. If you love finding out that the greatest songs in history were often accidents nobody trusted at the time, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Because the mistake at the center of this record changed music forever. Here is what happened in that studio in America. When they ran the riff through the fuzz box, the sound that came out was dirty, buzzing, aggressive, and completely alive. It was not smooth like horns. It was snarling and rude and electric. And it turned out that the wrong sound, the placeholder, the temporary fuzz that Keith wanted to replace with brass, was 1,000 times more exciting than any horn line could ever have been. The accident sounded like the future, and this is why it truly mattered, far beyond one song. Before Satisfaction, a distorted fuzzy guitar was a rare novelty, a weird noise on the edge of records. This song took that snarling, filthy sound and put it dead center on the biggest single on the planet. And overnight, that became the sound of rock and roll. The little fuzz pedal Keith had used as a shortcut sold out in shops across the world because every guitarist alive suddenly wanted to sound like that. Keith's throwaway placeholder quietly rewired the electric guitar for everyone who came after, and listened to the riff itself, because its genius is how little it is. It is basically 3 notes. It is so simple that it is one of the first things a beginner ever learns. But that simplicity is the entire trick. It is a hook you physically cannot get out of your head. A nagging, repeating, unresolved little figure that sounds exactly like the frustration in the words. The music does not describe the feeling. The music is the feeling. That is why it drills into you. And Mick's words were genuinely dangerous for their time. In 1965, a global #1 that openly sneered at advertising, at consumerism, at the whole machine of being sold things you do not need, and that hinted at sex plainly enough to make radio programmers sweat, was a real shock to the system. It was the sound of the young generation turning around and looking at the shiny world their parents had built and saying, out loud, that it left them cold. When the song came out in the summer of 1965, it did not just do well. It detonated. It became the Rolling Stones' first American #1, and very quickly the song that defined them. The band that had made its name playing other people's blues was suddenly a songwriting force, a cultural earthquake, the most exciting group in the world. More than any other single, this is the one that made the Rolling Stones the Rolling Stones. Of course, it got into trouble too. Nervous radio stations fretted about the lyrics. That line about trying to make some girl got quietly censored in places. But the controversy did exactly what controversy always does for a rock song. It poured gasoline on the fire. It became an anthem precisely because it made the establishment squirm. And here is the most beautiful part of the whole story. To this very day, Keith Richards will tell you that he still hears that riff as horns. He has said it for decades, that the fuzz was always meant to be a demo, a rough guide, and that in his imagination the proper version of Satisfaction has a brass section blasting out that line. The single most famous guitar sound in the history of recorded music is, to the man who created it, an unfinished accident that he never fully signed off on. He has spent 60 years hearing trumpets where the rest of us hear one of the greatest guitar riffs of all time. Think about everything that had to go not according to plan. The song he did not want released. The sound that was only a placeholder. The riff he caught by sheer luck. Half asleep, wedged between 40 minutes of snoring. Every single thing about Satisfaction was a happy accident that the artist himself doubted. And it became one of the greatest records ever made. Sometimes the thing you are certain is unfinished is the exact thing the world has been waiting for. But the real reason this song refuses to die is the feeling buried inside it. That title was never really about one girl or one frustrating afternoon. It named a permanent modern condition. The restlessness that no purchase, no upgrade, no new thing ever actually cures. Mick Jagger, howling that sleepy phrase from Keith's Dream, put his finger on an itch that every single person alive has felt and that nobody can quite reach. And it has only gotten truer. In 1965, it was the radio and the television telling you that you needed more to be happy. Today, it is a glowing rectangle in your pocket, doing the exact same thing 1,000 times a day, every scroll a fresh little promise that satisfaction is one more purchase away. The Stones diagnosed the disease 60 years before it went completely global. You cannot get no satisfaction. And now the entire world is engineered to make absolutely sure you never do, because you have felt it. You know this one in your bones. The moment you finally got the thing you were certain would make you happy, the job, the phone, the win, and the happiness lasted about a week, and then quietly the old itch crept right back in. That is what this song is. It is not a whine, it is a diagnosis. And the reason it still sounds furious, and this alive 60 years later, is very simple. The itch is still there. It never left. So the greatest riff in rock and roll came out of a sleeping man's dream, was played on the wrong pedal by accident, and was released into the world against its own creator's wishes. All to say the one thing the modern world will spend your entire life trying to make you forget. That it is never, ever enough. And that maybe, just maybe, knowing that is the beginning of being free of it. So here are 3 things to take with you. 1. The fact. Keith Richards dreamed the most famous riff in rock, recorded it half asleep right next to 40 minutes of his own snoring, meant the fuzzy guitar only as a placeholder for horns, and did not even want the song released. He was outvoted by his own band, and that outvoted, unfinished accident is the record that made the Rolling Stones. 2. The craft lesson. That wrong, temporary fuzz sound became the sound of rock guitar itself. A placeholder launched distortion into the mainstream and rewired the instrument for everyone after. Sometimes the mistake you are trying to fix is actually the innovation you did not know you had made. And 3. The one that stays with you. This song named a feeling that has only grown truer with every passing year, the modern itch that nothing can scratch, the sense that it is never enough. It lasts because it is honest. And it still sounds alive because if you are honest too, you cannot get no satisfaction either. Not fully. Not for long. So tell me, what is the thing you were sure would finally satisfy you, right up until the moment you got it? And do you hear horns? Or do you hear that fuzz? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story changed the way you hear those 3 little notes, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because there is a new hidden story behind a song you love every single week. Thank you for listening. And the next time that riff kicks in, remember, you are hearing a dream, caught on tape between 2 snores, that somehow told the truth about all of us. Together we are, together we